Hey guys, I wanted to make a quick video about how to do the box method that I was kind of trying to do an example of, but I realized that I rushed it a little bit. So I just wanted to do a few quick examples on how to do it. And here's the first one. Here we're given a function, and to start it, we want to just create a box. Now in this first box, we want to put our A, and then in the other box, we're going to put our C. Our A is going to be this one first, and we can put the whole thing. So x squared. We don't have to worry about it just being a coefficient. And then our C, we have this, negative 24. Okay, now, the only one missing would be our B, correct? Which would be this. But we have to break it down into these two boxes. So how do we do that? We make an x right here. On the top here, we multiply our A and our C coefficients. And on the bottom, our B coefficient. So our A and our C, that would be 1 times negative 24, which would give us negative 24. Then on the bottom is just our B, so 2. Now we have to look at what two numbers multiplies to give us negative 24, but adds to give us 2. Now to make this easier, we can just focus on 24. And you don't have to worry about it being negative, we can just scratch that out. So what numbers give us 24? We can start from the top. 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, and 4 times 6. Now, we see here that we can make 2 already with these two. So 4 and 6. We see that we have a positive 2, which means that the 6 has to be bigger. So this would be a negative 4. Finally, put them in these boxes. Doesn't really matter which one. We put in our numbers already, right? But we see here that our B value has a single x. So we're going to put x with both of them. Because remember, this is your A, it has 2 x's. This is your C, which has no x's. And this is your B, which is split up. So that's why they both have this x. Okay, now we're going to break these up from the outside. Let's take a look at this column first. What similarities do we see here? What can we factor out? Well, they both have an x. So we can put an x here. And now let's look at this one alone. So if we have x, what multiplies to give us x squared? Another x. Now we're missing this value. X times what is going to give us 6x? Right, 6. And now let's look at it this way. We already have x times what will give us negative 4x? Right, negative 4. And we already have our values. Negative 4 times 6 is negative 24. We have x minus 4 because it's a negative 4. And x plus 6. We set each of these individually equal to 0. So if x minus 4 equals 0, then to get x by itself, we just add 4 on both sides and will give us positive 4. Now let's do this one. And now we have our x's. And you can check this with the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula tells us that x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. We have our a, our b, and our c. So negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, let's do another example. This time we have 5x squared minus 3x minus 2. So we start off with our box. And remember, in this one right here, we put this one, and this one is this one. So the whole thing goes inside the box, not just the coefficient. The one that has only the coefficients is the x right here. And remember, at the top here, we have a times c, and at the bottom, we have just b. So our just b is negative 3, and at the top, we have 5 times negative 2, which is negative 10. What two values multiply to give us negative 10, but add to give us negative 3? We have 5 and 2. And because 3 is negative, then the bigger number has to be negative. So now we just plug these in wherever. So negative 5x and 2x. First we look at this column. What things do they have in common? They both have a 5 and they both have an x. Now let's look at this one alone. What do I need to multiply to give me 5x squared? And I already have 5x. A single x. Now let's look at this one. We already took out a 5x. So how do we make negative 5x? We just multiply by negative 1. And now let's look at this one. We can do 2 times x equals 2x. And it makes sense because negative 1 times 2 equals negative 2. So now we just put them together. X minus 1 times 5x plus 2. And this is just the factored form of this, which means that if you redistribute it, like so, you would get the same equation that you got from the beginning. So now we set these two equal to 0 to find our x. So x minus 1 equals 0 will give us x equals 1. Now we set this one equal to 0. We subtract 2 on both sides. 5x equals negative 2. And to get x by itself, we divide by 5 on both sides. X equals negative 2 over 5. And we have our x's. Okay, let's try one last problem. So we're given 3y cubed minus 18y squared plus 27y. Now the first thing we want to do is not jump ahead and make a square, but actually we can see that they all have something similar right away. They all have a 3 in common, and they all have a y in common. At least one y. So we only take out the things that we can. We see that 3 can be taken out in all of them, and they all have a minimum of 1 y. If this was a squared, we can take out 2 y's, but they all share 1 y in common. So let's take them out. 3y times y squared gives us 3y cubed. Because as we learned, if we multiply exponents with the same base, you just add them. So right here, it would be 6y, because 3 times 6 is 18, and y times y is y squared. And we keep moving along. 3 times 9 is 27, and there's already a y there, so no need to add a new one. Now that we have it more simplified, we can then move on to the box. We already know which one goes here. It's our first one. So y squared. And we know that this one goes in here. 9. Now we make our x on the side. We know that b goes over here, and a times c goes on top. So in our b, we have our negative 6. Remember, these are only our coefficients. And on the top, we have 1 times 9. So 9. What multiplies to give us 9, but adds to give us negative 6? Well, we can do 3 and 3. And we see that it's negative. So they would both have to be negative. And it makes sense, because a negative times a negative equals a positive. So now we can put these in here. But remember, there's a single y in here. And since they're both a part of this x, this y comes down with them. Now let's look at this column first. What do they have in common? They have a y in common. Now let's look at this one. Y times y gives you y squared. Now let's look at this one. If we already pulled out our y, all we have to do is multiply by a negative 3 to give us negative 3y. Now let's go this way. Now we can put it all together. But remember earlier we took this out, so we have to bring it back. And we can set this one equal to 0 because it has a y. If it didn't have a y or another variable, we would just have to ignore it. So 3y equals 0. We divide 3 on both sides, and y equals 0. We already know what we're going to get when we solve 1. And this one will just give you the same answer. So your x's are 0 and 3. Doesn't matter what your variable is, because when it's graphed out, these are the points where your function crosses the x-axis.